So, hi Gary, how are you?
I'm good, generally,
It's
I
been a
think.
while, hasn't it, since
It
we've
has.
spoken?
Yeah. It's been several months. In the meantime, I've been up to all kinds of things, so
You do seem to be keeping yourself busy.
I try.
Uh, this is all about Meet the Speakers. So we're talking to Gary Vasey, who's going to be one of our main speakers. And Gary's title is The Template Alignment, an Energy Trip into Czechia, which is going to be fascinating. But we'll get onto that in a moment because you do lots of things. I've been looking at your website. I've always been knowing you a bit as well. But 50 books, wow, that's
Yeah,
amazing. And you've got your YouTube channel, which is very active as well,
yeah,
and your website, and also the podcast,
yes,
which I've been on, which is
yeah.
great. But what I wanted to ask you basically to start with, how did this all begin? How did you get on a spiritual path? How did it
Well,
all start?
yeah. And I mean, growing up, seeing ghosts and having experienced poltergeist activity. And also, I guess I've never been a normal person. So I remember, remember sitting watching my mother baking in the kitchen. I must have been 5 or 6, and I was suddenly thinking that I wasn't actually there. I was in a little room, and I was attached to a machine, and I was experiencing the life through this machine. And then I sort of went up in the air, and I could see like room after room after room after room down long corridors, all with people sat in, attached to these machines, living these lives. So sometimes I joke that actually this is a paid for holiday, and when I die, I'm going back to reality.
Mm.
And then ghosts. I mean, even when I was a little kid, and this is how I got started writing some of the books as well, was writing about some of my own experiences. When I was a kid, the most peculiar thing happened. I went to bed and I'm put to bed. I wasn't very old. And I was woken up by this little green or blue. I argued with my parents which color it was because they remember me telling them different, but it was either green or blue. Little peculiar man that jumped out the mirror on my wardrobe, shot me with a gun as I laid in bed, and the gun was one of those ones where it went bang, but then a flag came down and said bang, right, like a joke
Right.
gun, and then jumped out the window. And the window was closed, so he jumped through the glass, and and
Wow.
and I couldn't believe what I'd just seen. And anybody would think, a small child, it was a dream, or it was you just, overactive imagination. But my dad came running up the staircase because him and mum heard the gunshot.
Right. Right.
And
And then
I never understood what that was about because, and I recently I thought it was blue, but when my mother was alive and she heard me say that, she said, "No, no, you said it was green at the time." So,
yeah,
memories going. But it was a very, very interesting initial paranormal experience, and after that, stuff would happen quite frequently. And I was one of those guys that even at the age of 11, 12, I was going to the public library. And a bit like Thomas Sheridan sometimes talks about, I was picking out the lurid book covers about Satanism and witchcraft with topless women on the front cover and trying to hide them when I went home so I could read them, because I wanted to read about magic. And I was a bit embarrassed about the topless women on the cover and what my mother would say. And I eventually found myself, with my parents' permission, going to meetings of the church I think it was a Church for Spiritual and Psychical Research, which was meeting in the Methodist Hall. And I was like 14, 15, surrounded by people in their mid 50s and older, and quite a novelty. And one of the ladies, Mrs. Marsden, I remember her name, she lived quite nearby and she knew my mother. So she sort of took me under her wing and gave me access to her library, which meant I got books by, Rudolf Steiner, all kinds of magical people, Aleister Crowley, Golden Dawn people. And so I was reading all of that stuff back in 1974, 75. And I was even trying to put it into practice at school. If I got bored in a math lesson, I'd try to make the teacher look at me through concentration, or I'd try, if there was a window cleaner, I'd try to get the window cleaner to look at me just by concentrating on, not looking at them, but concentrating on look at me, and seeing if I could do it. and I discovered I could do it, and could do it quite consistently. So this all, I mean, this set up for a life of magical adventure, really. And then, of course, I ended up studying with Servants of the Light and did their 5 year correspondence course, which I found absolutely magnificent and really, really set me off on a track. I found an inner contact called Astaroth. I I did all kinds of stuff. And many of the books that I wrote early on all come from stuff that I picked up in meditation and received during that time. And eventually I became like a supervisor for the school as well. So I was supervising other students, all from Houston, Texas at the time. And eventually I left that school and just kind of went solo. And that's what I really do now is just solo pursuits. And earth energies have become one of my biggest passions because um, once you get engaged with the earth energies and you start dowsing them, um, it just blows your mind, absolutely blows your mind. And I subscribe to the theory that Rory Duff originated, which is that the major nodes on these lines where they cross are in fact what was referred to as the Holy Grail in the past. And so just recently I've started doing meditative work on the nodes and trying to utilize the energy for specific purposes. Anyway, that's probably a far too long-winded answer for you, but
No, no, that was fascinating. That's exactly what I was looking for. Yeah, no, sort of examples of what you've experienced. I mean, something that can sound strange, kind of, but when it happens to you, I can vouch for the fact that you know it's true, don't you? It's not.
yeah, yeah.
When something happens, it's in there and you know it's right.
Yeah. Well, things like okay, so I douse in the car sometimes. So basically, I understand how the lines work now. So I can plot the alignment on a map, and I can figure out roughly where the line's going. But you're not actually the alignment is the straight line that passes through all the nodes. It's not the two currents, the male and the female currents. They kind of can be very sinuous. So even though you've got the trajectory, you don't really know where the line's going to be. So I end up driving back and forth trying to find the line in the car. And sometimes it's gone quite sinuous and you don't think it's gone as far as that. So you're going up and down and you can't find it. And eventually you get a bit frustrated and you think, okay, well, I'll just drive a bit further up the road. I still got nothing. So I park the car because I want to look at the trajectory again, make sure I haven't made a mistake. And come to find out that where you parked the car was where the line is. And the
Right, it's
number of times that
automatically.
this happens is beyond, I mean,
Yeah,
statistically, it's beyond it's absolutely certain that where I park the car, not thinking about finding the line there, just to go to the bathroom or to check my phone or whatever, that's where the line's going to be. And it happens time and time and time again until you're forced to draw the conclusion that actually, I know where the lines are subconsciously, but not consciously.
right. Yeah.
And I'm kind of directing myself. So that's one sort of weird instance. But another one is tracking the lines. Sometimes you find that they take you on a journey of your history. So you find yourself turning up at places that played an important part in your life. Or in one instance, I call it Denny's line because it's like my daughter. It passes through her school, where she is now. It passes through the school she used to be, passes through the hospital she was born in, passes through the apartment she was conceived in, passes through the house she lived in. And it's just like it somehow has this connection to my daughter. And so
Wow.
you start to think, well, hang on a minute, what is it? What is this earth energies? So I call it the
Yeah,
weird
yeah.
web, right? So
Okay.
the weird sisters spinning the web of fate, and it's the weird web for me. And it just, you go on a journey through the landscape. You go on a journey through the history in the landscape because of the places that you find on the line. But you go on a journey into yourself as well, and you find out a lot about who you are, how you're connected to nature, how you're connected to the powers that be, whether you call them pagan gods or whatever. But you start to discover this matrix of reality and beyond reality that becomes really addictive because there's no end to it. You just keep exploring and finding more and more and more. So the Templar alignment is the first major Type 4 alignment that I mapped across the Czech Republic. But I found many other lines, particularly at nodes, crossing that one. So right now I'm tracking another line which we call the pagan line or the pagan alignment. And the interesting thing is, I can't prove it quite yet, but hopefully maybe one day I will be able to prove it. But it seems to, if you follow the alignment trajectory, it actually seems to pass somewhere north of Hull, which is where I was raised.
Yeah. It's. I mean, delving is not something I've really ever been involved in. I mean, I can get mistakes in check, walking to stone circles and
Yeah.
I can find the energy line round. But it's not something I've ever really followed. But I get people on the tours that do are really into it, and they say things like they're walking and there's a line that starts here and ends here and goes through, and all these really complicated names for the different lines. I mean, is that something you do, or is it just generally following in the direction of one
Hmm.
line that crosses through the landscape?
I tend to map everything I find uh, and then try to follow the major lines from one end to the other. So I followed the temple alignment. I'm following this pagan alignment. There's many, many others that I found that that I've got partially mapped, from place to place and maybe over 50, 60 kilometers. And eventually I'll get around to tracking them too. But dowsing becomes really instinctual eventually. And sometimes I don't need the rods now. I feel the line anyway. And I dowse with one rod. And I use the rod as a tool to ask all kinds of questions too. So I can say, just like, where's the beginning? Where's the end? Where's the middle? Are there any bands in the line? Which direction is it going? Is it positive or negative? All kind, I can even sit in the car. I've got video of me doing this, where I'm sitting in the car and I'm saying, okay, show me where the template is, and it'll point pretty much in the direction I'm going. And say, okay, am I going to cross the Templar in less than 100 meters, less than 500 meters, less than a kilometer, less than two, and it'll tell me the distance, and then you can gauge the distance until we find a line, and it'll be spot on.
Oh, that's amazing. So I mean, what are the lines? Are they? I sort of envisage two ideas, or maybe three. One of there being sort of cracking the landscape, like the early ghost sets, what you think they would, or the thrones, what the early meeting places would have been on top of, say, a part of the landscape that is narrower, like on a rocky outcrop where the earth crust obviously narrower. And then there's the idea, which I kind of like, it's measuring the path of where people have been crossing for sort of thousands of years, and or is it, is there an actual grid that you see that because if it's something that's
Rory
just
Duff, who's a fellow geologist, because
yeah,
I'm a geologist, he's a geologist, has done a lot of thinking about this and a lot of work, and I generally subscribe to his ideas and think it's correct, which is that they're in fact compressed sound waves, and they go all the way around. So basically, you've got obviously the planet has a solid core and a liquid outer core, and with the spin of the planet, basically one is shifting against the other. So you've actually got a sound generator, and it's generating very low frequency sound and in all directions from the core of the Earth. And where that sound is concentrated, you have what we would call an energy line. And actually, although probably not measuring the frequency of the sound wave, you can measure the frequency of the lines because the lines are not stationary. They're tied in at nodes, but like a skipping line between two person, it's actually oscillating between those two nodes, right? So
okay,
over a period of time, you can actually douse the edge of a line and see how it's moving backwards and forwards over the same piece of ground. And so it can be a 24-hour frequency, a 12-hour frequency. And I think we've got a lot of work to do in terms of classifying all the different types of lines because they definitely come in groupings. And Rory's done quite a lot of work on that. So the lines I'm following he calls type 4. And they tend to be the second widest lines other than the very massive ones, of which there are very few. And the Type 4 lines, when I first started dowsing them, were around 90 paces wide, but they've been gradually growing in width, so they're now
Quite wide, isn't it? Yeah.
135 paces in width. And then there's another group of lines that used to be 25 paces, and now are like 35. And there's another group of lines that are about 15 paces, another group of lines that are about 10 to 12 paces, and so on. So you've got all these different sound lines. And then you've got the grids, like the Benker grid and some of the other ones, which are not sound lines, but electromagnetic
All
energy.
right. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
there's a whole world of lines out there. And it always makes me laugh when people say, oh, well, dowsing, there's no scientific proof and blah, blah, blah. And, I don't believe in stuff I can't see. Yet they're quite happy to watch the television and listen to the radio. Where's that coming from? Can they see those waves?
Yeah,
No.
yeah, yeah.
It's
So
it's
what
uh
about, when I do my little, obviously I feel like a novice, but when I go into a stone circle and it always, as I walk into the circle on the circumference, the it, they've crossed, and then if I walk backwards, they open out again.
yeah.
It's always that. So what am I
Yeah.
picking up there then?
Well, usually when you've got a node, and usually a stone circle is on a node, those stones are arranged in such a way that they're leveraging the energy. So what I always find is, like you say, a circle or a circular shape, an outer ring that you can douse that's connecting all the stones in the circle, and then usually radials going from the stone into the center. And you find, and also if you're open to it, you can actually douse the shape of the node. And Hamish used to
Yeah,
douse those, and he saw the patterns. They'd be like star patterns, sometimes symmetrical, sometimes not. And that led Rory also to talk about types of nodes and try to classify nodes. So you have nodes that are symmetrical, you have nodes that are asymmetrical. So, for example, you might have two type 4 alignments coming in and noding, and then you'll have several of these smaller lines coming in, and everything's nicely, symmetrical. So you get that symmetrical star type pattern. And then you get other ones where maybe you've got two lines coming in noding, and then you've got a single, maybe the positive or the negative of another line noding, but its pair does not, for example, and that would be an asymmetric node because it's not balanced. And then if you plot the pattern, it's going to be like a more of a warped star shape, if you see what I'm trying to say. So we talk about symmetrical and asymmetrical nodes and all different types of nodes, and this is where Rory, who's written this massive book, and I've just got the follow-up actually, that's absolutely amazing amount of research into every aspect of the Grail that you can imagine, really postulates that the Grail actually refers to these nodes, that the Templars went along these lines from one node to the next looking for the Grail, meaning the biggest powerful node that they could find. And,
yeah. I suppose
when
it's
you
the
talk
biggest
about
you
the
can
Holy
receive
Grail,
from.
there isn't just one, there's grails, right?
Yeah,
So the nodes
yeah,
become, some of these powerful nodes become the Holy Grail. And when you go into these nodes and you feel the energy and you work with that energy, it really starts to resonate because I sometimes feel like, it's rejuvenating, it's both spiritually and physically. I think it's healing energy. I've started doing some meditation exercises within the energy and found that the result of the exercise is more dramatic than it would be if I sat here in my room here and did the exercise. So um, we've Rory's developed this group of people that's growing in number that go to the nodes and do group meditation at the nodes with certain objectives in mind. You know, which we won't get into, political sometimes.
Oh, right. Okay.
But
Well,
just set the world to rights, basically. Yeah.
yeah, I do that a lot.
Yeah.
But then I wake up the following morning. But yeah, I mean, what do you think about this? Like, people are always asking me, and it's a big question, isn't it? Um, why are these stones here? What are they all about? And I always say, to me, it's like from a previous society that was much advanced, and they had a different type of physics. Um, so I suppose that tries to, and so with that in mind, right? I Dowsers have said that around the stone circle, you've got like a positive and negative, and of the stone. They say that one end of the stone is positive, one is negative, and then the other one is the other way around next to it, and one next to it, that is the other way around. So I see a kind of sine wave
Yeah.
going through positive, negative around that circumference thing. So I'm thinking that possibly another form of energy source that maybe a previous society
Oh, I'm
may
convinced
have
of
had.
that. I'm absolutely convinced that our ancestors weren't as, dumb as archaeologists would have you believe.
Well, yeah, cool, yeah,
I think they were very sophisticated, but in a different way. I mean, they didn't have the technology, the material technology that we do to make steel and things, manufacture stuff like that. But they could work with natural stone, they could work with natural energies, and I think they probably utilized these sites for all kinds of things. I mean, I'm not an expert on that, but to me, when you find a major node, or even not a major node, just a couple of small lines crossing, you'll always find, not always, but mostly you'll find a church on it,
yeah,
and the church will have been there for 1,000 years, and before that it was a pagan site, and before that, and so you start to realize that humanity has forgotten about these earth energies. We've lost that spirituality. We've
yeah,
forgotten that connection with the planet. And I sometimes, so I've developed to the point where I can sometimes feel the lines without using the aid of a stick. And Eva, who I often go with, she doesn't even need a stick. She can feel the lines immediately. And I would imagine that back in a few thousand years ago, it might well have been that shamans and whatever could actually see the lines, you
yeah.
know,
I'd be surprised. Yeah,
and
yeah,
track them. And I started dowsing energy lines on archaeological sites in Moravia because along the Austrian-Czech border is where the Moravian Empire, well, princedom wasn't much of an empire, and that was a Slavic princedom around 800 to 1200, right? Excuse me. And there's quite a lot of archaeological sites, and the one thing that I noticed is that they have churches, and the remains of which are built always on the lines, on these small lines. And where there's a larger church, it will be on a node of all these smaller lines. And it's so consistent that I
yeah.
went into a museum that had been built around an archaeological site where they'd unearthed the Slavic church with all the skeletons in situ and everything. And then they built a museum around it. And I went in the museum and dowsed, and of course the line went straight down the axis of the church, right? The long axis.
Right,
Um,
into the east and like the
yeah.
pulpit. And
So basically there's only one conclusion you can make from that. It can't be an accident that every single Slavic era church is aligned on a line, can it? It can't. I mean, it just isn't, that doesn't make any sense. The only sense is that they did this deliberately,
they were following
which
a
means that the
pattern.
Slavic, the
Yeah.
Slavs back in 800 certainly knew about these lines. And then if you read Rory's book, Grail Found, he has, the idea that the Templars also followed these lines, and he's not the only person that thinks this. I had a friend in the UK who unfortunately passed away a few years ago from cancer, but she and her partner were following the birds. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but they were following birds who led
Right.
them on a
Yeah.
journey, and they realized in the end that they were following pathways, that these were all Templar pathways, and it took them from stone circle to menhir to some ancient burial to mound and so on, and they started to come to the same sort of conclusions that I am doing the dowsing of energy lines. So to me, it all starts to tie together, and I think that there's a grid of energies created by the planet and created by the forces beyond the planet. So electromagnetic, sound, all the different frequencies and mechanisms, and that is part of everything on the planet. And in the past, I think people understood the significance and how to use them. So if you subscribe to The Secret and creating your own sort of reality by, cosmic ordering,
Yeah.
perhaps that works better on a node because of the energies. Perhaps that's what people were doing, right? They were trying to manipulate reality by visualizing stuff on a node. And then they would build a structure on the node to identify it, to magnify the energies. And what did the Templars do? They built massive cathedrals using
I was
sacred,
just about to mention that. Yeah, I mean,
and
if you want something that's really going to emphasize
yeah, to
an
emphasize and
energy,
accentuate the energies to work with it more effectively.
I think the Templars came back from digging underneath the Temple Mount,
Yes.
and they suddenly did that. So whatever they found
And
beneath
again,
Solomon's
Rory's,
Temple,
if you, I mean, I keep mentioning Rory, but he's done some amazing work, Rory Duff. And, if you grab this book, it's a massive book, big read, and it takes forever because every chapter you have to start thinking really hard about, it starts really getting your juices flowing. But he reckons that's what the Templars found. They found something to do with the real meaning of the Holy Grail. And um, out of the Templars came the early stories about the Holy Grail,
yeah,
and it's all connected with Templars and then the Rosicrucians and so on. And it's all referring to these earth energies and where these nodes are. And when you think about it that way, it makes perfect sense. Even in the stories, it's a cauldron, it's a spear, it's a sword, it's a cup.
all different things.
Yeah, but if you look at a node, if you look at the node, a sound wave node, and you look down on it, depending on where you are, it looks like a cauldron, a cup, a sword, or a spear.
Yes, yeah. So you're back to the tarot again. But if you this is right left wing out from left field here, which they kind of might be connected. Have you know that the phrase "et in arcadia ego"?
Say what now?
Et in arcadia ego.
No,
It's that on the painting of Poussin's painting, and it's something I thought you might have come across it. It might
I
have
don't
something to
speak
do with
Latin. Translate it for me.
it's there in Arcadia. I am. Oh no, therefore Arcadia I. It's on the Poussin's painting that's associated with Rennes Chateau, all that sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
I just thought you might have something, but no, it's okay if that's
I
not
read
something you
about it.
want
I
to.
think I probably read about it in your book because I read your book on all of that, and there's definitely a tie-in, I think, between that and the energy lines and the whole thing going on, and I think there's many tie-ins. Rory would probably have some ideas on that because, as I say, he's done such. I don't know how he did it. He's done so much
Yeah,
research. It's unbelievable. And
that's great.
all I'm doing is kind of independently, I think, showing that it's what he did was right. Because obviously I didn't know all of this stuff about Rory's research until after I'd discovered some stuff and went looking for answers, and then talking to Rory, I'm like, wow, okay, I found that too. Wow, okay, I found that too. It's like I'm falling on
Fascinating.
and proving a lot of what he come up with.
So your talk, the temporary line, but without going into it, it was spoil it, but you're going to take us along
I'm gonna
this
take
path.
you on a bit of a journey across. Well, I'm going to take you on, like I said, I'm going to take you on multiple journeys. I'm going to take you on a journey across part of the Czech Republic.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about some of the historical aspects of that, the Templars and a certain family in that were very important during that era, but also a journey into synchronicities, personal revelation, and all of that sort of good stuff without giving too much away.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sort of the Slavic paganism, I suppose, comes into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Slavic
Yeah,
comes into it as well. I mean, Eva and I, well, Eva wrote a book that I helped her with by giving her my perspective. And actually, it's the last book we put out, and it tells the story from her point of view. I've already told the story from my point of view in another book, and we found ourselves almost living an archetypal journey of her being one goddess and me being one god in the Slavic hierarchy. That when we realized blew our heads off. It's like, oh my goodness me, this is the story of these two gods, and we're sort of living it.
Wow.
Perun, who's the sky god and sort of the lightning guy, in the Slavic pantheon, the sort of Thor with his hammer and stuff. She she bought me, she bought me a birthday present, and it was a geological hammer because I'm a geologist and I didn't have a hammer. I was using a regular hammer. And at the time, I'm like, oh, thank you. Finally, I've got a proper geological hammer to work with again and take with me in my bag. So when I'm doing stuff, I can have a tap at the rocks and see what gives. And then I'm thinking about it. I said, you realize you just give me my magical weapon as as Perun.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's fantastic, isn't it? So this is you haven't finished this. This is your project, isn't it?
Yeah,
This is what
it's
you're on.
ongoing. It's absolutely changed my life because now I'm fit and active. I'm out every weekend. I'm walking kilometers. I'm exploring places that I never would have looked at. I bought a camper van so I can, stay out longer and not come home. So,
Anyway, I know you're a busy man. You're a very busy man. So I think everybody's met Gary now. They definitely know who you are. So hopefully, you guys out there will come to the conference, and it's in St Anne's on Sea, and it's on the 25th and the 26th of October this year in the Glendower Hotel. And it's a beautiful hotel. It's the what can we call it? It's one of the special um, Glen, Best Western hotels. So all the information is on my website. That's megalithic tours.com. So you can book from there. Then you ring the hotel and book a room. But if you don't want to stay in a hotel, there's many hotels in St Anne's on Sea in Lancashire, straight across from Hull, where you originally came from.
yep.
So thank you very much, Guy. Really fascinating now.
Looking forward to the conference, to be honest.
It's going to be great. Everybody will meet up,
Yeah.
and always a great crowd. So I hope to see you guys at the conference, and I'll um, say goodbye for now. And
Yeah.
back to
Cheers.
you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Bye.